ഏവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. കൊച്ചി തിയേറ്റർ ഫെസ്റ്റിവൽ 2026 സംഭാഷണ പരമ്പരയിലേക്ക് സ്വാഗതം. ഇന്നത്തെ സംഭാഷണ പരമ്പരയിലും റിസോഴ്സ് പേഴ്സൺ നീലം മാൻസിംഗ് മാം തന്നെ ആയതുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മൾ രണ്ടും ക്ലബ് ചെയ്തിട്ടാണ് ഇവിടെ സംഘടിപ്പിക്കുന്നത്. ഇന്നത്തെ വിഷയം തിയേറ്റർ മേക്കിംഗ് എ കൊളാബറേറ്റീവ് പ്രോസസ് എന്നാണ്. കൊച്ചി തിയേറ്റർ ഫെസ്റ്റിവൽ 2026 മുഖ്യ സാന്നിധ്യമായ പത്മശ്രീ ഡോക്ടർ നീലം മാൻസിംഗ് ചൗധരിയാണ് ഇത് നിർവഹിക്കുന്നത്. ദേശീയ തലത്തിൽ പ്രശസ്തയായ സംവിധായികയും നാടക പ്രവർത്തകയും കമ്പനി തിയേറ്ററിൻ്റെ ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റിക് ഡയറക്ടറുമായ ഡോക്ടർ നീലം മാൻസിംഗ് പഞ്ചാബിൻ്റെ ദൃശ്യ സംഗീത പൈതൃകങ്ങൾ സ്വാംശീകരിച്ച് സമകാലീന ചിന്തകൾ വഴിതെളിക്കത്തക്ക വിധം നാടക പരീക്ഷണങ്ങൾ സജീവമായി നടത്തിവരുന്നു. നാഷണൽ സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് ഡ്രാമ തുടങ്ങിയ പ്രമുഖ സ്ഥാപനങ്ങളിൽ നിന്നും പഠനം പൂർത്തിയാക്കിയ ശേഷം പഞ്ചാബ് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയിൽ ഇന്ത്യൻ തിയേറ്റർ ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ ചെയർപേഴ്സണായും പ്രൊഫസർ എമറിറ്റസായും സേവനമനുഷ്ഠിച്ചു. കിച്ചൺ കഥ, ഫിദ, ദ സ്യൂട്ട്, നാഗമണ്ഡല, ഹയവദന എന്നിവ ശ്രദ്ധേയ നാടകങ്ങളാണ്. 2011 പത്മശ്രീയും 2003 സംഗീത നാടക അക്കാദമി അവാർഡും ഉൾപ്പെടെ നിരവധി പുരസ്കാര ജേതാവാണ് ഈ വ്യക്തിത്വം. മാമിനോടൊപ്പം ഇന്ന് വേദി പങ്കിടുന്നത് ഡോക്ടർ അഭിലാഷ് പിള്ളയാണ്. ഹീസ് ദ ഡയറക്ടർ ഓഫ് സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് ഡ്രാമ ആൻഡ് ഫൈൻ ആർട്സ് തൃശ്ശൂർ. ഇന്ത്യൻ നാടകരംഗത്ത് ഏറ്റവും ശ്രദ്ധേയമായ മലയാളി സാന്നിധ്യമാണ് അദ്ദേഹം. നാഷണൽ സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് ഡ്രാമയിൽ അധ്യാപകനായിരുന്നു. വിവിധ യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റികളിൽ വിസിറ്റിംഗ് ഫാക്കൽറ്റി ആയിരുന്ന അദ്ദേഹം പല അന്തർദേശീയ നാടകോത്സവങ്ങളുടെ ഡയറക്ടറായി സേവനമനുഷ്ഠിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഡിജിറ്റൽ തിയേറ്ററും സർക്കസ് തിയേറ്ററും മുഖ്യ താല്പര്യമുള്ള അദ്ദേഹം അതീവ ശ്രദ്ധ നേടിയ നിരവധി പ്രൊഡക്ഷൻസ് അരങ്ങിലെത്തിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഈ വിഷയത്തോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ തിയേറ്റർ മേക്കിംഗ് എ കൊളാബറേറ്റീവ് പ്രോസസ് എന്നതിനോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ ഇന്നലെ ഇവിടെ അരങ്ങേറിയ നാടകം തമാശ വേറിട്ട ആശയം കൊണ്ടും രംഗാവതരണ ഭാഷ കൊണ്ടും അഭിനയ മികവുകൊണ്ടും ഇവിടെ അരങ്ങേറിയ തമാശ നമ്മുടെ എല്ലാവരുടെയും ശ്രദ്ധ പിടിച്ചു പറ്റിയ ഒരു നാടകമാണ്. ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ചും ഇതിൻ്റെ തിയേറ്റർ മേക്കിംഗ് പ്രോസസ്സിനെ കുറിച്ചും തൻ്റെ നാടക യാത്രയെക്കുറിച്ചും നീലം മാൻസിംഗ് നമ്മളോട് സംസാരിക്കുന്നതാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഈ സംഭാഷണത്തിലേക്ക് നീലം മാൻസിംഗ് മാമിനെയും അഭിലാഷ് സാറിനെയും ഹൃദയത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഷയിൽ സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുന്നു.
Okay, ma'am. Namaste very much. And it is quite interesting to have something like this. First of all, I would like to thank Chandradasanji to have a festival in Kochi like this. And even though I was not able to make it up yesterday, but the show of Tamasha, which happened yesterday, and today we are all here, and there are a lot of respected dignitaries who are there in the audience, and also ma'am yourself, being like as a student I have been seeing your work from that time till today. So I would really like to pitch in first thing, because Chandradasanji was also saying theatre making a collaborative process, and I know that it's a question which I wanted to raise also. Like, you came from a background of history into theatre, and then this whole collaborative process of theatre, do you think it starts right from the beginning itself, or there was a time when in the history the theatre became collaborative, or it was right from the beginning it was collaborative in its nature? And what does it actually mean to be collaborative? What is it actually?
Thank you very much. I know the talk is called Theatre Making a Collaborative Process. Um, Theatre, as we know, is a community art. Unlike the other arts, if you're a writer, you need your pen, your imagination, and your paper, or your typewriter or computer. If you're a painter, you need your canvas and paints, or watercolors or pencils. But the performance art making is a collaborative process by its very nature, by its very temperament. I know that the word director has a very male resonance. It seems to suggest authority, that one person in charge who gives directions to the actors on how to move, how to choreograph, what kind of gestures to take. And even when I was a student at the National School of Drama, that's the way it was done. Even though we had an incredible director, Ibrahim Al-Qazi, who created the foundation and the value system and the ethics of what it means to make a choice, like being in the theatre, but it was actually choreographed. We had terms like blocking. We had terms like gestural language. We had terms like how the director sees the characters, which means that there was a person who was called the director who actually was the decision making, who made the decisions about the movement, about the gestures, about the blocking, about the character, about its analysis. But slowly over the years, things changed. And then I think, you in Kerala come from such a rich tradition. You have Kudiyattam, you have Kathakali, you have Theyyam, you have hundreds of forms which are so inspirational and which have been canonized. But when you do what you call contemporary theatre or modern theatre, you have no methodology. Each director chooses his or her own way of communicating with a group of people that you work with. But for me, work has almost from the very beginning been collaborative. I think it's the way I saw how the work was supposed to be processed. You have a group of actors. I didn't see myself as an authoritarian figure who told the actors that this is what I want. It was actually, I give an idea of the character, whether it was a well-made play or whether it was a devised play. If it's a well-made play like Yarma or Nagamandala or Little Eolf, which are structured beginning, middle and end, it's like Godard said that every play has a beginning and middle and end, but not always in that order. You can take a decision of how you want to toss it around. So even when I formed my own theatre company and I was doing work, I gave an idea to an actor about the character, about the situation, about the possible objects that he might wish to use, and told them to think about it and do an improvisation. Improvisation became my language of training, where you give an idea and you see how it develops. Sometimes what I told the actor and what they did was so far removed from what I told them. But yet, there was, and sometimes what they did was completely unworkable, but maybe there was a moment that I could hold on to and stitch into the performance of their character. So in this way, the actors become collaborators in the whole journey of putting a play together. This does not mean that the roles or the function of the actor has changed or the role or the function of the director has changed. It's just that the hierarchy has been, to some extent, dissolved.
Thank you. So it is the way how you told about blocking, and then you are getting a well-made play, and how you collaborate. Also, like as you were saying that improvisations is has become your language in a way, and that is from where, if I am getting it right, is where the play actually gets evolved, is through improvisations. Then I would like to ask you, as how you collaborate with actors, do you think in the similar way you get into the design also? Like how do you, what is the language with designers you do, and do designers also collaborate with you, or do you direct them saying that no, I need this costume, or I need this color, or would they also bring in, like how in improvisations actors surprise sometimes, and things what we never think about, sometimes they bring in, and it happens. And another question is like blocking, gestures and movement, this kind of vocabulary which had come up, and then later there were, like you told about improvisations. So is it improvisations which are only it's through certain exercises, acting exercises, the improvisations comes in? As how do you develop, and what are the difference between an improvisation for a well-made play and an improvisation, if you take like Monto's stories? Are there any difference? How do you construct the conditions for these improvisations? These are two different questions which I'm asking.
I think sometimes
It's again not. It's again not. You can have this.
I think they're two different questions, but they overlap the questions. For example, when I'll just say it as I reflect on it. When we have a well-made play, like recently I did what you call Hai Vadana by Girish Karnad, which is a play which has a structure, which has a language of performance, which has myth, which has folk, which has realism, which has all the elements that make a play very exciting and very challenging. And each play somewhat decides its own vocabulary or method of how you process it. There is no fixed language. Sometimes the kind of choice of script that you make determines the kind of equation you create with your actors. Now, I remember when I was doing Hai Vadana, then I had actors who were from the National School of Drama, some actors who'd worked with my company, some actors who were fresh. So it was like a mixed group of people who I felt could bring interesting, imaginative elements to the production. And I remember I kept on, every time I came into the rehearsal space, they were saying, when are we doing the play reading? When is ma'am doing the play reading? Because I hadn't done the play reading. And because it's a classical, modern classic, everyone was familiar with the text, but there was no such thing like what the typical method is, that you take a play and then everybody sits around a table and you read the play, and different people read the different characters, and then the director gives certain notes and the director gives certain instructions of how to look at the character, which means the director in a certain way almost plants conditions in the minds of the actors. I don't want to do that, because I want to know the actors are the real masters of the stage. It is their body that carries the text. It is their experience that will determine the emotional charge of the character. So for me, they are my collaborators. And I want to nudge their memories. I want to nudge their experiences. So I try to create conditions in the rehearsal space so that it's a place of trust, very often some of them will say, we have an idea, but it might be a little foolish. I said, it doesn't matter. You know, don't fear what you think might be a silly idea. Maybe that idea contains a wealth of something which you may be oblivious about and I may be unaware of. So bring that. Let's decide if it works or if it doesn't work. Let's not reject before we have processed it. So in Haivadan, I actually was quite nervous because Girish Karnad's family was coming to see the play and I had changed the ending completely. If anybody is familiar with the text, there's Sati and they kill each other. And I thought to myself, this is such a contemporary play because it talks about a woman's desire, where she desires the mind of one man and desires the body of the other. And she manipulates it that she tries to fuse both these men as her lovers. And in the end, there's death and killing and duel. And I thought, you start off with an idea which is so radical, and then in the end, you want to resort to conventionality. So I changed the end completely. And when I met Girish Karnad's wife and I said, I hope it didn't upset you that I changed the ending completely. She said, I'm so happy you did that. It was such a silly ending. You know, so because I feel that once a play is part of a public domain, then who does it belong to? Who does the play belong to? I mean, very often when I did Stree Patra during the Tagore Festival, I kept on hearing words like, play it as it is written. How do I know how it is written? I was not there with Shakespeare, with Tagore, when he was writing his play. I don't know what the subtext is. And I'm really always urging my actors that try to look for the invisible text, the text which could be written but was not written. You know, the subterranean layers of the consciousness which are not articulated but which do exist. So my exploration goes on that level where I make the actors into collaborators. It's not that my eye is not there. My eye is there to take the decisions about what is working and what is not working, because I am the outside eye, which is editing, which is taking a decision about what to keep and what, I mean, I can't tell actors what to do, but I can tell them what not to do. The second question about collaboration with designers. Well, the only designer I've collaborated with, before that, when we do our own theatre companies, we don't have so much money that we can have collaborators. We can have a play, we can have a text, but the director does the costumes, the director does the set design, the director does the use of objects. But when I work for an organization or an institution like the National School of Drama or Haivadan, which I'd done for Bhumija, art funding agency and impresario agency, then there is a kind of budget which is unimaginable for all of us who work within our own limitations, which are basically financial. So with that, I've collaborated with this wonderful director from Kerala itself called Deepan Shivaraman. I think in a certain way, Deepan is so outrageously pushes you to take risks that sometimes I get scared of him because I don't know how to put my play with the scenography that he does. Now, a scenographer is not only a set designer. He also decides on the costumes, or he takes a decision that this is working and this is not working, which objects are working and which are not working. So he becomes a true collaborator in the real sense of the word, which means that he's as invested in the production as the director. Now, I did a play last year for the National School of Drama, based again on Monto's story, who's the love of my life, called Lemon Soda. In that, he came to see the rehearsal. The rehearsal was designed for a proscenium, audience on one side and viewing from the other side. He saw one or two rehearsals and he said, okay, I'll give you the set design tomorrow. He worked with the set designers and it turned out to be a revolving stage. I said, but I've designed the whole play to be viewed frontally. How do I do it? I can't do it. I can't. It's not fitting in with my. I was fearful, but I think I really admire him and respect him and put a great value to the kind of collaboration we have, because he forces you to think differently, even within one's own risk-taking, fearless productions. He pushes you in a direction which makes you take that leap of faith. So Lemon Soda, I had to, within 10 days, rework the productions, and the audience was sitting in the round. So I had to re-choreograph the entries, the exits, which made it so much more challenging for me. Because what I was doing was a conventional work within the framework of audience actor relationship, but he pushes you in directions which are very exciting and very meaningful. Like for Haivadan, he came to see the rehearsal, and I had put, like yesterday, if some of you saw Tamasha, I just had all the trunks at the back to give levels. And in my house, in my production, in my green room, I have lots of painted trunks and trunks which have designs and colored trunks. So it looked like one of these nice colorful trucks because it was on different levels, high, low, very low. So he saw that and he saw the rehearsal and he saw how the actors went back to the trunks and he said, we're going to have a truck. So somewhere when he sees the work, he gets a catalyst to take a decision which is a little larger than life, a little epic. So it pushes you into making your work also larger than life. So.
Okay, that's. I'm just picking up certain things which you told. One is that, ma'am, you talked about working with folk, and now I would like to elaborate a little bit my question towards that. How do you explore or collaborate with folk? Because that's something which is, we have gone through a lot of different kinds of explorations with folk in all different regions of India, and also particularly movements like Theatre of Roots and all those things have also happened. So how do you look, and what is your way of looking at folk? Where is are you like how would you like is there a limit to the way how would you like to explore folk into contemporary, or is folk the folk is definitely contemporary, but then why do we call folk when folk becomes contemporary? All those questions which I'm just raising to you. I would love to hear your view on how would you like to. And then also my next question comes to you is that this whole, in theatre schools we usually face, because recently now I've been working with this 10+2 graduates who come after, this is the course which now I'm running here, because in National School of Drama it was always postgraduate students who used to come for post-graduation after degree. Now here I am getting 10+2. Even they have a notion of how Shakespeare has to be done. Now, how does that come into them? I'm a bit surprised when who told you that Shakespeare is done like this? And they have that notion. So from where does this notion builds, or as you had mentioned that you were not there when Ibsen or somebody who has written the plays, what was the subtext or anything, but there are notions of a play should be done in this way or this or other way. These are the two things which I wanted to, and then definitely like Deepan Shivaraman is a wonderful example, because he breaks almost everything what the director thinks and he takes it further. But I would also like to ask, about trunks. And I have seen works in which trunks are there and trunks become part of it. So would love to know in your improvisations the connection of trunks and how, because in Tamasha also trunks came in, and would love to know more about anything with trunks. These are three different questions. I can repeat it again.
No,
if you
I
would like.
will. I will remember.
Yeah, that's what.
So first is on the folk, then there's a trunk. What was the middle one?
The middle one is about the notion.
Okay, okay.
From where does the notion
Okay,
of theatre
okay.
come?
Well, I'll start with the notion of where it comes from. We've always been told, our language is full of notions. Sita jaisi pativrata, Ram jaise maryada purush. You know, what it means to be. The moment you tell an actor that you're doing the role of Tughlaq, before you know he gets a certain stance. They're templates which are so visible in everyday life. Nobody's seen Ram, nobody's seen Krishna, but the moment a feather comes, you know this is Krishna. The moment a bansuri comes, you know it's Krishna. The moment you go in Tribhang, you know it's Shiva. So we have the moment somebody's wearing a white sari, you know that she's just lost her husband. The moment somebody wears a sandoor, you know it's newly married. So we live in a world which is so symbolic in terms of stereotyping or making cliches. That before you know, I remember Raj Babbar, who was my classmate, when he was trying to hit Bollywood, he said, everybody said, tum villain ka role waise karo like Ajit was in that film or like Pran was in this film. So even in Bollywood, they wanted you to be like Rajesh Khanna, or they wanted you to be like, everybody does that Shah Rukh Khan pose. So we are fed every day into what behavioral patterns should be. This is what women should do. This is the way they should sit. This is the way they should laugh. This is the way they should be good bahus. This is the way they should. So we are surrounded by that kind of behavioral templates or stereotyping of how one behaves. I remember a long time ago, Anuradha Kapoor, a very fine director, National School of Drama director for a long period. She came, when I was heading the Department of Indian Theatre, she came to do Romeo and Juliet with my students. So one very short boy, without what you would call the conventional chocolate boy look, as they call it, was chosen to play Romeo. I think for about a week he was in shock. He said, "Madam, how did Anuradha ma'am choose me to play Romeo? Do I look like Romeo in any way?" So we have already, without ever seeing Romeo, and Shakespeare doesn't give descriptions. I mean, I always say a playwright is a Mahakanjus. He's a complete miser. He gives very little details. So one came, so Ram came, Sham left. Where did Ram come from? Where did Sham leave? So and so is reading a book. You know, Peter is reading a book. What kind of book he's reading? Is it a newspaper? Is it a textbook? Is it a dirty novel? Is it a detective novel? We have to fill in all these details. So I think young actors have already come with what you call a baggage of what a hero means, what a heroine means, what a villain means. It's like Peter Brook's famous Empty Spaces talks about, he went to Africa and he made one of the actors read a speech of what are the three sisters' names? There's Cordelia. What is the bad sister's name? Anyway, she's a negative character. He made her read the whole test that King Lear does to his 3 daughters is how much you love me. So one says, I love you like the stars and the moon and all the jewels in the universe. She's the bad one. But the good one says, I love you like a daughter should love her father. And she's banished in King Lear. So this, Goneril says, I love you like this and like that, and all the, as wide as the ocean, as high as the sky. And she gets all the wealth. Now the actor who was reading the speech had no preconceived notion, because she'd not read the whole play, that this was supposed to be a negative character. She read it like it was written. She read it without the prejudices of already a predetermined way of looking at a character. So whenever we read a play, most classical plays, we've already preempted the energy of the character. So through exercises, which you mentioned in your first thing, you try to break the preconceived notions that they have towards what the role means. And you say, do the unexpected. What is the unexpected gesture that the character would have, which is not what you have predetermined in your mind? So there are ways of breaking that fixed notion of how characters should be looked. Like, for example, I saw a Russian film, King Lear, and the actor must have been 5'1", who played King Lear. I remember I was shocked, because you always imagine King Lear as being tall and strapling. So I think it's part of the whole training of an actor to see that they don't fall into the trap of cliches. As Stanislavski says, the biggest danger to any fresh thinking and fresh art is the stereotyping of your imagination. About the folk. When I worked in Bharat Bhavan with one of the most wonderful directors who played a great role in my life, called B.V. Karanth. And when we were working in Bhopal, in Bharat Bhavan, which is a wonderful multi-arts complex, winds of change were blowing. The theatre of roots had come. We were thinking that most drama schools, including the NST, were training the actors on the Stanislavski system, on Meyerhold, on Bertolt Brecht. We had to find something which was local, vernacular, and regional. And those winds were blowing not only in Bharat Bhavan, in Bhopal at the Rang Mandal, but they were also happening in Panikkar, was working with the Chakyas. Ratan Thiyam was working with his own traditions. Habib Saab was working with the Chhattisgarh artists. So those kind of explorations was happening. And in Bharat Bhavan, we had a program which we called Purvarang, which means, we have a Sanskrit scholar sitting in front of us, which means the training of an actor. So what Karanchi had decided, he took the master performers of Madhya Pradesh, like the Nacha tradition, the Rai and Baredi tradition, and he made urban actors who were so stiff. When you talk about urban actors, you're not talking about actors from the metropolis. You're talking about actors from small towns in Madhya Pradesh, Bina, Guna, Chhindwara, and made them interact with these master performers. And the same actor who was so stiff and so uncomfortable while doing a Chekhov and a Ibsen, which were the plays, the standard plays of our time. But the moment he heard the beats of his own local tradition, the body started moving. They were not from the folk tradition, but they were familiar with the sounds. They were part of their memory box. So you felt that you could open up an actor through this interaction. It was not making them into folk artists. It was just part of the training process of trying to make the actor relate to his own body, sounds that are familiar, but have become unfamiliar because of whatever urbanization was happening at that time. So it was a very interesting kind of program which is performed every evening on the steps of Bharat Bhavan. So when my husband got a transfer to Chandigarh, Karanji said one thing to me. He said, whatever work you do in Chandigarh, you must do it by forgetting us. You must work with local actors, you must work in the local language, and you must work with your own understanding of what it means to be a Punjabi. Now, I was a completely anglicized person because we'd lived in England in my childhood. My father was a doctor there. When I came, it was college time, so there was no relationship with the language the way one has if you are born and brought up in a state. So for me, going back to Punjab was like a journey into my own lost memory and my own lost history. Because language is not only words, it's cultural memory, it's idiom, it's imagery, it's many, many things. It's like now I can only work in Punjabi. So then I came across this wonderful poet called Surjit Patar, who's like an iconic poet of Punjab. He died 2 years ago, unfortunately. So we had a collaboration where he translated all my plays. But coming back, I did Rashomon, Kurosawa's film in Punjabi, which was based on a text that I got from Bharat Bhavan called Matiya Burj. And then I did some, I worked with the Sufi singers, I worked with different folk forms with the martial arts of Punjab, which is called the Gatka. So I was training myself. For me, I was a student all over again, training myself to understand my state, which I'd been cut off from. I was a complete aberration in NSD because I didn't know Hindi, I didn't know Punjabi. So there was nothing, I don't know how they took me, because I think I was taken in because there was a gender imbalance in 70s when I joined. Otherwise, there was no reason because I had nothing to recommend me. So then I came across a group of folk performers called the Nakals. They could sing, they could dance, they were female impersonators. They don't have a tradition which is classical. It has what you would call village tradition, which is they can strum the tumbi, they can play the dholak, but just danga danga dung and tanga tanga tung. There's no variation. But what really fascinated me about this group was their capacity to improvise, to ad-lib, and how Brechtian they were. In the middle of a narrative like Sohini Mewal, suddenly the earthen pot, which is the matka, on which Sohini crosses the river Chenab to meet her lover, animates itself and starts talking and saying, I am not fully baked and now it's time for you to drown because this matka is going to break and you're going to die. But if this is what the playwright wants, we have to go ahead with it. It was like quite amazing. In the middle of a very sad moment, the horse will start singing. The actor who's doing the role of a horse, by just putting a chadar over himself, just putting a piece of cloth, he becomes the horse and he gallops. So I found these simple tools and breaking the fourth wall, where the female impersonator is doing all this Miss Rosie, Miss Hurricane, Miss Bulbulain, they have these fancy names, in the middle of doing a sexy dance, would suddenly tell the children in the audience, chup karo, betho. For a moment they would come out of their character and go back into being dancers and female impersonators. So I found all these elements very fascinating. And then these actors became part of my theatre company. It was not that I used them as an exotic leitmotif or use them to exoticize my work, but to see how two different groups of people from different worlds could shed the skin of their separateness and come together and make a piece of work together. And the other thing is they worked with B.V. Karant for 22 years. So Karanji taught them how to use their musical instruments in traditional instruments in a non-traditional manner. He taught them that you don't have to use the tabla just like tal, but you can use the body of the tabla, you can use the naad, the anhad, different ways of using it, that anything that makes sound can be a musical instrument. Trunks. Well, I think trunks came into it because when you go to do a play, you travel with trunks. You put your props and your musical instruments. So they also became the set because you're traveling by train, third class. You have to have everything that goes under the whatever, so the size has to be right. So somehow I fell in love with trunks. I think there's no great reason behind it. It just seems simple, it seems practical, and it seems possible.
Okay. Because you have explored so much, and so much of language we have got from trunks. The way how a trunk becomes a home, trunk becomes a wealth, trunk becomes almost everything in the world. So that is what I just thought, that how creatively trunks gets used in the production. That is why I was just thinking to talk about it. Now, I would you have now just you talked about Karanji, and before that you talked about Alkazi, and I mean you are one of those rare personalities now with us in direction who has worked with both of them so would love to know what is the actual if I would ask academically, because they both were running institutions, and you have worked with both of them. So, what are actually the difference? Because both were trying to make the modern Indian theatre, and they were like there, and they were in the heart of it. And so, what are the differences, and was there any contradictions in both of them? Like as being a student, like this teacher says this and this teacher says something just opposite to it. Can happen regularly, like learning and unlearning, which we say in sometimes, because we learn something and then we unlearn after some time. So did this ever happen between Karanji and Alkazi? Because they both were there also as the directors of National School of Drama. And so would you like to just talk about it, their classrooms and their rehearsals and all those things?
Well,
so that
I think they both had a passion for theatre. So there was that commonality. They both loved theatre and it was their life. If Alkazi told us to work for 7 hours, he worked for 14 hours. And it was similar with Karanji. So the ethics that they both carried in terms of their relationship with the world that they had created were quite similar. Differences were there, but I think the difference were also because of the times. They both came at different points of time. Alkazi was a Renaissance man. He was really larger than life. He was epic. He not only told us theatre, but he also taught us about life. He taught us, I remember he would bring ties for Om Puri, who was my senior, and teach him how to tie a tie. He also prepared us for a future journey into a bigger world. Then he would take us sometimes to one only fancy hotel that had come up in Delhi, because he wanted us to know what cappuccino was, the coffee. He wanted us to know how to sit in a hotel, in a restaurant, and how we talk to the waiter. I'm mentioning what may sound like trivia, but it's not trivia. It was exposing us to the fact that we all came from small towns. We all came from uncertain about the bigger world. Right from telling us about T.S. Eliot to Henry Moore. Like, for example, when you went into the rehearsal room, you had to take off your shoes. So we used to take off our shoes and run in rehearsal. When we came out, the shoes were nicely arranged. After that, nobody dared to not put the shoes in proper order. He would go to the library and check who had issued a book, who had not issued books that month. So he would come and say, "You didn't issue any book that month." So we felt that we had to. So he, by very simple methods, he taught us the value of reading, the value of order. He'd come to our hostel. He would tell us that at lunchtime, don't have onions, because you're in the art of intimacy. You can't have a mouth smelling of onions in an intimate scene. It's bad for the co-actor. So little things about life which became really life lessons and gave us a value to the profession that we are in were taught by Al-Qazi. And he taught us about grand spectacles. He taught us about composition. He was a master of composition. He taught us about color palette. So, and he did come from a school which you would call method acting. But even though he did plays like Tughlaq and Andha Yog and Suryamukhi and Razia Sultan, what you would call larger than life, big heroes and big heroines and historical figures. He also did Mrich Katek in the folk style. We also got Shivram Karant, who came and taught us Yakshagana. So, it was really unfortunate that this so-called myth was perpetuated that he only did Western plays, which is not true. He worked very closely with Mohan Rakesh, and Lehron Ke Rajhans was written in collaboration with Al-Qazi and the students. So I think I'm very fortunate that I had him as a teacher, because when you have a good foundation, then I think you make a solid structure on top. Whether the solid structure happened or not could be my weakness or my limitation, but the grounding he gave his students was very, really rooted. B.V. Karant came from the Gubbi Theatre Company. He learned the Yakshagana. He learned music from Omkar Nath Thakur. He learned Hindi at the Banaras Hindu University. So he was also a Renaissance man. And because he said, my greatest tragedy was when my voice broke. Because in Gubbi Company, suddenly he was neither a man nor a boy. So, and he taught me, all my plays became musicals because of my long collaboration with Karantji. I mean, what I liked about what was so wonderful about Karantji, that he gave everything. He gave you what was the best for your production. That's a very rare quality. Teachers normally hold back. They don't want to give fully. But B.V. Karantji was not like that. I learnt about improvisation really through him, because I remember he was doing Mrich Katek, and Karantji his way of working was like a storm. He used to be like a storm, 5 productions in 1 month. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that how can anyone do 5 productions in 1 month, but he could do it. But sometimes he would not have the last scene choreographed. I remember when he did Mrich Katek, the last scene, which is the most complex in Mrich Katek, had not been rehearsed. So he told the actors, because there were hundreds of carts that were crisscrossing the stage, the carts were made, but it had not been choreographed or rehearsed. So I remember before the show, he's telling the actors, don't let me down. Please do it, improvise and do it. And it became one of the most startling scenes, because we all felt at that time that he was like, I hate to use the word because it's got such odd connotations, but he was really like a guru for all of us. He had that spirit, that desire to give his art, his experiences to his students in a manner which, like passing on the knowledge like a secret mantra. So the actors also felt we mustn't let our director down. So he had that power.
When you told, like, yeah, I know you are not using guru as how guru has been used, but when when you are saying so deeply, I would really like to know, ma'am, because being a woman, because I have seen women directors when I was a student, when they were directing, and it was happening in National School of Drama. I was in the final year, and there was a production happening, and regularly I used to hear this comment from all the like the registrars and all those staff, male staff, because nothing gets fixed, everything is improvised, everything comes from an exercise. There is no blocking, the kind of blocking, or there's no kind of saying direction that stand like this, say the dialogue, turn this way, give a pause, there will be a clap there in the audience, and all those things which were taken as star directors. And then regularly as students we were given, see, women directors, nothing will be fixed, last day tak it will go on like this, nothing gets, and one doesn't know when the play will start, when the play will be. So there was continuously this thing of women directors won't be able to direct as how male directors direct it, or how male directors make it to for the audience to clap or to whatever it is. And as a student, I was very clear, I don't want to learn where audience have to clap, because I haven't come to learn that, but to learn what is coming from me. And that was something which was working there. So this kind of difference which was there very strongly in National School of Dramas, that whole staff system and everything. Were you part of this, facing this thing of very strong binaries? Because I know 90s, 80s were very difficult time in terms of how women directors were coming up and making their point to say. So,
You know, living in Chandigarh gives you a sense of isolation. You're not part of any big grand drama. But I know this, what you're saying. I know this argument or this reputation that floats about improvisation and no structure and no linearity. We might think it's an easier way of working, but it's a very difficult way of working, because you just don't know the note on which to begin, the note on which to take the climax, and the note on which to end. It's a very complex way of working because you have no comfort zone. So to dish it or dismiss it as being a kind of last minute change. I have sometimes sat in the wings and watched my play, and I've had a eureka moment, like an epiphany. And then when the actors make the exit, I said, just do that. Can you pull out that moment a little more in the last scene? I think what is interesting about theatre is it's an ever evolving thing. There's no fixity. It's not fixed. Once a film is out there, the director sees it, he can't say, oh gosh, I could have done this scene differently. But in theatre you can. And that is the power and the strength of it being live. And really, to think that if you don't have a fixed script is a easier way to work, it's bungam. It's a much more complex way to work, and it's a choice that you make. You know, you don't have, you decide on the rhythm of the play. Otherwise in a well-made play you have a beginning, middle and an end. So you know exactly where the climaxes are going to be. Here you've got to take decisions all the time. And you've got to take the decisions in a manner where you've got to trust in strange, inexplicable ways, intangible ways, the material that you're working with.
Yeah, it is because I have been following it, ma'am, completely exercises and improvisations, and I mean till recently, and it has deeply influenced all your works to me completely. Right from your work from Yerma onwards, I have been seeing. Now, I would like to also ask, like you had used the word Brechtian, and would love to know more about who are the people who influenced you in terms of, I mean, intellectually, and by practice. You have named Alkazi and Karanji because they were two teachers who have been part of your life, but others, and then you had a lot of expeditions in terms of uh, uh, like having your group travel to different countries, and also having kind of interactions with Pina Bausch and all. So would love to know more about what all are the different influences, and who are the one who have really like made you to really rethink your art, or rethink the whole making of theater. And like when we see something, we get hard hit. And we keep thinking, what have been working till now I have to really think about it, and things like that. Does it happen, and if it happens, with whose work? This is something.
I think in life one is continuously being influenced. It's it's not that if you're open to life, if you're curious about life. I've seen lots of things at the Kochi Biennale, and I've felt very deeply impacted by them, and I think about the images that I come across. Of course, Alkazi, Dr. B.N. Goswami, who was my teacher in art history, B.V. Karan, Surjit Pathar, lot of people whose work I see, whether it's Maya's work or whether it's your work, Abhilash, or Deepan's work or Anuradha Kapoor's work, they all trigger something in me. Trigger me in ways which I never thought were possible. But the one person whose work really made me realize the potential and possibilities of space and time and imagery and risk taking was Pina Bausch. When I first saw her in 1992, 93, I couldn't understand her work. You know, it didn't have a kind of rationality or logic, you know, dogs walking up and down a stage, carnations getting crushed, people jumping from ladders onto cartons of boxes, a coffee jar being emptied on somebody's head, you know, a naked accordion walking up and down. I mean, I remember I'd taken my students, because that time I was teaching, and they said, "Madam, what did you think about it?" I said, "I don't know. I mean, something happened, but I don't know." Because one had not formulated a language of articulation. But I think then then Pina and me were in lots of festivals together. So I got a chance to see her work in Japan. I got a chance to see her work in Avignon, in Hamburg, in other festivals. I realized that you don't have to be logical. Art is not logical. It's not rational. It's not the brain. It's intuitive. It's instinctive. Like I did a play called Gum Hai, which unfortunately didn't have many shows, but I think it's one of the works that is closest to my heart, because COVID happened, and then, you know, for 2-3 years nothing was happening, and it just went down under. In Gum Hai, suddenly in the middle of some very scene, I had a film song from Anarkali being played, sung, because I always have live musicians on the stage. Mohe Pann Ghat Pe. This is during a water crisis. So the actors were a little bewildered that why is this happening? But it was the scene which stayed with people who saw those 3 shows the most. That how did you think of this sudden twist in a water crisis that you're talking about? Mohe Pann Ghat Me, Nandlal, and all of them with plastic buckets on their head, and you know, just doing a simple movement and going to a little water feature. So I think intuition and instincts and trust plays a very important role. Like for example, when I did Kitchen Katha, at the entrance of the play of the kitchen, I had a little swing with the pumpkin. So my actor said, "Why do you have a pumpkin?" I said, "I don't know why, but it just seems right." So they all laughed because they know I do illogical things. And then when I went to Pondicherry, I had a show of Kitchen Katha in Chennai. And from there, I decided to go to Pondicherry. I'd never been there. When I went to Pondicherry, I found outside each shop a pumpkin hanging with the same marks that the actor during the process transforms the pumpkin into many things. So I asked the shopkeepers, "Why do you have a pumpkin hanging?" They said it's supposed to be for good luck. So sometimes, there's part of what you call racial memory, collective memory, that is deeply embedded within us. And it is pulled out during the course of your creative journey. And I've learned how to trust it.
It's interesting, ma'am, how you told about art is not logical. But then it is true that, but it is also political in a way. So, yeah.
Everything personal is political.
Yeah, so that is the way, because they keep saying that the political is something which comes with logic, but I don't agree with it anywhere. It can come from anywhere, and political can be hard hitting. Sometimes it doesn't have to work logical in a way. What do you feel about it?
Well, I think all art is political. The way we sit, the way we dress, the way we eat, the way we interact with life, everything that we do is political. The personal is political, as Toni Morrison said. So you can't escape the way you treat the women on the stage, the way, like when I did Yarma, which you mentioned, the logical thing is that the husband is impotent, and that's why his wife is yearning for a child. But I thought that's such a simplistic way of looking at it. Their energies don't match. Sometimes when your energies don't match, then creativity doesn't happen. So I think every play that you see has politics of gender, politics of your relationship with the world embedded in it. It's what you pull out, what you highlight.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now I'm just, you had in the last, like you were saying that, in a way that local language, like your language, you can only do it in Punjabi, but then you have done a play in Malayalam now. And that's something which I do remember you were saying over the telephone when we were talking, that it is going to be in Malayalam and how you are going to understand Malayalam and how it has to be. And I know that you have in Tamasha, you have worked in Malayalam. So would love to hear, and I'm aware that you had worked before also in multilingual productions. So this kind of collaborations, where does it lead to, and how much does a creator of the work feels the intensity of what you do in Punjabi? Does it come in Malayalam or in other languages also, or how do you look at it, this kind of collaborations?
Well, I think it was very exciting, and it was very challenging to work in a language you do not understand, because you don't know whether they're putting the weight at the right place in terms of the words that are being used. I think the actors were so brilliant. The actors that are trained in the Thrissur Drama School brought such an extraordinary sense of surrender. As you know, there was limited money, there was limited means to do the play. But it was so wonderful because the actors were so outstanding. Of course, then you find tools. You find tools because initially they couldn't even, now they speak a little bit of Hindi. But that time they couldn't speak Hindi at all. And except for one of them who knew a bit of English. So there was no language also. But as you know, we sent the recording of what they were saying to the school, and it was translated in English for me. So I knew that what they were saying was what was part of the text that they had chosen. So it posed its own kind of challenge. I did 2 shows in Chandigarh, 2 rehearsals where I called people, and because I have an intimate theatre, and that's what the play requires rather than the large theatre we performed in, personally I feel, they were riveted. They didn't feel the need for language. So these were people who are not your theatre walas. They are local social people that I know, but they were riveted by the energy, by the honesty, by that you can smell, that you can sense, that the actor is completely has put the role on his soul, makeup of the soul. So then I did a play in Japan where I was working with 12 languages from Southeast Asia. So they all came with different acting protocols. So what do you hegemonize? So there are tools that you find for each production that you do.
No, that's really interesting, ma'am.
It's part of your growth as well.
Okay, but also let me, you have worked with a group of actors from Kerala in Malayalam. So, and how was the process in terms of selecting these stories of Manto? You have been working with Manto for a very long time. So was there any difference of actors coming from Kerala and then making, like from the south of India, and picking up Manto and then picking up the stories and that whole process? Is there anything which is like you felt the region were different and that is why the creation had some difference?
I think Manto doesn't write polite stories. He deals with, it's not located in Punjab. It's located today in the universe. What's happening in Gaza is impacting us all. What is happening in Iran is impacting us all. Wherever there's death, misery, and a lot of battles are fought on the body of women. So these are not alien stories. They are stories about strife and hardship and brutality and blood and gore. But within that, when I've done Manto, I try to find something affirmative, some sliver of hope. I try to find that. And whenever I do Manto in this devised improvisational manner, I tell the actors to choose their own stories that they would like to enact. Once they choose it, how they are inclined towards that story is already inbuilt in the choice. So even at the NST, when I've done 3 Manto productions, I have told them to choose their own stories. Sometimes I help them if they can't make a choice. Let's try that. And because so many stories overlap, and because they all, before I come to the NST, they all know. I remember when I used a pile of mud in one of the plays and the director was getting upset. You went and told the director, if you call Neelam to the play, there's going to be water and mud. So
I was there, ma'am.
So
that time.
So what happens is that they try to see the earlier productions and try to give me the same, and I'm terrified of them doing that. So you have to break that also. It's again about stereotyping characters. They've started stereotyping my love for Manto by bringing in the same elements that they see in my earlier plays, thinking that this is what I'm going to love. But I've already rejected it. You have to reject to move forward. You have to bunk your earlier work to make new work.
And this is the last question, then we'll open it for the public also. Ma'am, your making of the theatre, what I have seen is that actors, those who doesn't sing, this I have seen this with Karanji also, but it has come so organically in your process. They eventually sing, dance, everything they do. and this is the way, and it's a complete ensemble which comes out, because actors who are traveling from here, they were a bit worried about it. They don't know to sing, and who will do the music, and who will do, but everything they did it in that. And this process of the total, like how we bring a total theater through performers, is something which is astonishing, the way how you make the production. Even here the music came out from the trunk, and then everything, all the voice patterns. Does it happen through improvisations, or do you have a sound graph? Because I've seen in most of the right from Yerma, I've seen this happening, and there's a complete sound and music quality which is there, which Karanji has in fact talked about it a lot, even though I have seen only his later works, and I was also part of his later works, but this I have seen getting implemented in your work properly. What he's been saying, that when actors talk, they should sound like singing, and when they're singing, they should we should hear like they are talking. And this is something which comes out from your production, almost in every production. So what is the kind of an exercise, or would you like to share with us? How do you make them to reach to that?
Well, I have no idea. Maybe it just happens, as you said, very organically. Like, for example, I tell them that, switching off lights means you're interrupting the emotional charge of the audience. If the audience has to travel with you, then you can't have interruptions. So in the same way, like, for example, Sharad, he's, one scene is over, then he starts the trunks, and then from the trunk he starts that clap box, then he comes with the thing, then he starts that, then he goes back. So I tell them that the sound mustn't drop. Whatever is there can be made. I learned it from Karanth, that whatever can make sound can be used as a musical instrument. So trunks anyway have a sound, the throat has a sound, the foot has a sound, so you fill in the gaps. It's just the way it's choreographed. I don't have some roadmap. I don't have some grand methodology. Maybe I do have one, but it's an unconscious one.
Thank you, madam. I wanted to ask some more questions, but I think now we'll open it up to the people who are sitting here. If anyone would love to have some questions here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Meanwhile, they are thinking about questions. I would like to ask one more thing. You have extensively worked in academics, and as you told, there is no grand methodology or anything, but I have seen, because I have seen workshops, and how the workshops where actors come out saying that yes, we have got something here, and the continuous actions which you make them to do, or the repetitive actions which you make them to do. Would you like to talk about a little bit about your process with actors? How do you start with them? Because actors do come from all different disciplines. So how would you like to bring them? Would you like to share some exercises or certain conditions which you give them, and things like that? And also, I would like to know, in your point of view, because where theater is now going in academically, and would you like to see actor, director, designer as three different segments? Like Karanji used to say that everybody has to learn everything. In India, you can't survive being only a director or a designer. you know, you should know everything, and you should. But I think there were other views also there, that a designer should be only taught design, like how in the West it happens, because there is an industry and they can survive. Designer can survive, a director can survive, but here. So, what are your views on that, and where is the academics now leading to, the particularly in Indian system of training, the theatre academics, and where do you see the theatre academics should go to also?
Well, I think whatever training you have, it feeds into some other training. Like I did my history of art, and I was all ready to be writing on doing my PhD in art history and writing on art. But then I met Ibrahim Al-Qazi, and I was so fascinated by his persona that I thought I had no idea about theatre, but I wanted to be his student because he was so charismatic and so much like somebody who had never met before in my life. So I joined the National School of Drama without understanding the contours of what it meant to be an artist. I trained as an actor, but I never really acted. But I think the training of an actor, I mean, he did try to give me some roles, but I was so self-conscious and had so many blocks that I just couldn't let myself, didn't have the confidence, didn't have the tools, didn't have the relationship with my body. But it helped me as a director because I understood what an actor goes through, what the blocks in an actor is. My training in art history, learning about the great masters in European tradition, about Impressionism, Expressionism, Fauvism, miniature paintings, taught me about design, taught me about composition. So I feel that one feeds into the other feeds into each other without us even being self-conscious about it. So I'm not sure about the training bit. I think they can be, I mean, I don't know. Because when we were there, I trained as an actor, but the design students, there was stagecraft and there was direction. The stagecraft students learned carpentry and mask making and makeup and stuff like that. But I think they need to know about acting, they need to know about direction. So there should be maybe some classes which are separate, like music, dance, yoga, but the rest should be a consolidated course. I personally feel that, because you must enter into what's the actor's body in space, in a designed space, in a constructed space, how he relates to it.
Okay.
I would love to ask you something. It's about the use of. No, can hear me.
Yes, yes, I can hear
It's
you.
about the use of properties. See, I have seen in many of your plays objects and properties which are not expected in theatre is being used, like dry leaves, rice powder, cabbage, tomatoes, bread, skulls, utensils, boxes, etc. So which are not the expected property from stage. But you use it such a way that this very mundane, very ordinary, very raw things becomes or acquires a poetic meaning. So how is the selection of these properties and how do you keep on changing it? I've been seeing it in many of your productions. This kind of properties coming in.
Well, I always tell the actor that an object is a co-actor. You take the familiar and you make it unfamiliar. You use it in ways which are unexpected, so it gets a new way of looking at that object. Like, for example, in License, which you're referring to, the cabbage really becomes like she pulls out her organs, her genitalia, and she stuffs it in her mouth. And the cabbage looks like the uterus because of its layers and from. So it's not that the choice is done randomly. It is thought through. And it takes a long time to arrive at what kind of object should be used. Like what kind of leaf should be used in Tamasha for that rain scene. So it's not that you pluck any leaf. So when I do an act, I said, we need to give you some extension to your body, which is an object. Now, what are the choices? So it's a whole process of trial and error. It's not that the first thing you do is the one that ultimately, you've got to see if that object, from being an object like a tomato or a cabbage or a pumpkin, remains, it's a pumpkin, but it's also transformed into an image that becomes a metaphor. And the meaning of the word metaphor means to transport ideas. So how the object becomes a transporter of ideas.
Particular curse words or from another language like Malayalam. I was saying
It's that Z when Kallu is saying abusive language. So he's asking about that language which we.
the slangs we use in Malayalam.
Well, in Malayalam, I don't know. She tells me what it means. She suggested it. Yeah. So I ask her what it means because I don't know the language. Because she's being brutalized. When you're brutalized and you're being raped and you're not allowed to sleep because because he's getting customer after customer, so she is so fed up. So what comes out of the mouth? And as I said, Monto doesn't tell polite stories. He talks about the raw people who are born and brought up in the hardest of conditions, and they don't have the so-called cultural finesse in language which is acceptable to a certain social space, because they don't come from that social space.
I wouldn't say that as vulgar, because it is something which is in an art the boundary can easily, there is absolutely no boundary when there is so much of violence and everything has happened, then things move out, and as far as I am concerned, it doesn't stand as vulgar anymore to me. It is a response, and that response has to come at that point. That is it. Probably some people may not like it or hate it or whatever. Sorry, that is the way. Yeah, it is the way how I would like to see that sequence is. It's maybe really uncomfortable. People may go out. Okay, fine, but that's
the language of the character and the situation in which the character is placed. So it can't be a thank you, sorry kind of language. Yeah.
wanted to, from my own experience working very briefly with you, I don't know if you remember, in 2019 at NST, we were supposed to do our final year theatre production, but due to COVID, we kind of left the play halfway. But I just wanted to say, because we're already talking about objects and relationships, as building a relationship with objects, as a performer, when I was working with you encouraged us to kind of improvise a lot with the elements around us. And I remember working with water and stones and sticks that we found on the campus. And what I thought, which was very interesting, was I could somehow, with multiple improvisations that we tried doing, I think a span of a week, what I felt came out for me is the fact that I started building a relationship with the elements that I used to express very intimate, very personal relationship, very personal feelings that I was experiencing, moments that I was experiencing. So I think for me that kind of also helped in sort of like build, I would say maybe it helped me build an ecological sort of perspective around my environment. So I was like, things that I would usually just not look or just not observe in my everyday life could also be used to translate this internal experience that I was having in my own head and in my own body to externalize it, which I thought was very helpful and in some ways very therapeutic, because it was a pretty difficult time for me at that point. So I just wanted to say, for me, whatever you do, work that you do with objects and elements, it's super helpful as an artist. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a brilliant conversation between two stalwarts of Indian theatre. Dear Neelam ma'am, your play Tamasha and your presence here for this session have immensely enriched Kochi Theatre Festival, and it has added great value to the festival. We all thank you from the bottom of our heart. And Abhilaj sir, thank you very much for enriching the session with your presence and your insightful interventions. And we would like to present Abhilaj sir with a memento as a token of our love and gratitude. And may I request Professor Shaji Joseph to present Abhilaj sir with a memento. And I request Abhilaj sir to receive it as well. Thank you very much. നമുക്ക് തിയേറ്റർ വെന്യൂവിലേക്ക് പോകാവുന്നതാണ്. ഉടനെ തന്നെ കൊച്ചി തിയേറ്റർ ഫെസ്റ്റിവലിൻ്റെ ആദരം എന്ന സെഷൻ അവിടെ ആരംഭിക്കുന്നതാണ്. തുടർന്ന് ഇന്നത്തെ നാടകാവതരണമായ കുഹു ആൻ ആന്തോളജി ഓൺ റെയിൽസും നടക്കുന്നതാണ്. അപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് ഉടനെ തന്നെ തിയേറ്റർ വെന്യൂവിലേക്ക് പോകാവുന്നതാണ്. വളരെ നന്ദി.